Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Premier.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest.
Fred Armisen.
Prince Paul.
Javier Munoz. Seth Meyers.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Talkhouse Podcast. I'm Josh Modell. On this week's episode, we've got a pair of musicians with interesting backgrounds, one in computer engineering, the other in stand-up comedy. It's Vagabon and Jaboukie. Now, Vagabon, a.k.a. New Yorker Letizia Tamko, just released her third album under the name, and as you'll hear in this chat, it had been 4 years since her last. But Sorry I Haven't Called was worth the wait, and another cool stylistic leap. Tamko's first album, Infinite Worlds, felt like a fresh take on indie rock. Her second, a self-titled record from 2019, dipped more into varied electronic pop. But Sorry I Haven't Called, which was partly produced by former Vampire Weekend guy Rostam, takes things even a step further with an eye toward something even bigger and bolder. And even though the songs were inspired by a dark time in Tamko's life, they turned out incredibly buoyant and upbeat. Check out a little bit of Lexicon right here.
Our lexicon is gone when we dance all night, when we dance all night. Our lexicon is gone when we dance all night, when we dance all night. Our lexicon is gone when we dance all night.
Now, Jaboukie Young White is best known as a stand-up comic, writer, and actor. You may have experienced his jokes on Big Mouth or seen him as a correspondent on The Daily Show or acting in Only Murders in the Building. If you're a fan of this podcast, you may have heard him in conversation with Jonathan Pierce of the Drums a couple of years back. But in the past couple of years, Jaboukie has set his last name aside and worked hard on his debut album, which just came out. It's called All Who Can't Hear Must Feel, and it's an incredibly diverse set of songs that touches on a bunch of genres, rock, hyperpop, jungle, without sounding beholden to any one in particular. Jaboukie played almost every note of every instrument on the record, and as you'll hear, he spent a lot of time getting it just right. Check out a little bit of Cranberry Sauce right here.
How can I continue without you? I once was strong, but now I'm lost. We hunted for something new. My birthday suit still in your arms.
In this chat, Jaboukie and Vagabon talk about how creating is like molting, about how music can feel more timeless than comedy, about doming your audience, and about how Janet Jackson is mother. Enjoy.
So where are you in the world right now?
Well, I just got back to LA. I was just traveling a lot. I went to Lisbon, and then I was in New York.
How was that?
It was good. I'm trying to be someone who doesn't live for work.
Speak to that. Amen to that.
It's hard. It's harder than you think. You know?
Especially when the thing you do for work is like so joyful and beautiful.
Exactly.
It's so easy to make that your entire life because music is a beautiful thing.
Exactly. And it takes you all over the world. So it's like, how can I complain? But for sustainability reasons, I need to get a life. Like, I really do. I need to get a life that's not just like making records and touring.
That's so real.
Yeah.
Portugal is like having a little moment. I think Lisbon might be the new Barcelona.
I first discovered it when I played Primavera, which is like probably my favorite festival in the world. Like,
really?
And they have one in Barcelona, and they have one in Porto, Portugal, which is like little low key. So ever since I discovered that in 2018, I've been going to Portugal like once or twice a year.
Really?
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about Portugal?
The food.
What is the food like?
It's like almost Mediterranean diet vibe, but it's also just not a luxury to eat good food the way that it is in America and a lot of places. It's like baseline, you're allowed to eat good food because you're a human and you deserve it.
It's always so wild going to a place and being like, oh, I don't have to try hard to like treat myself to nice things.
Exactly. But anyway, where are you? Is this your studio?
No, this is my apartment.
Yeah.
I got a little studio just exclusively for music stuff. I used to. You were in the
I
little
was
like
in the-
home studio thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were one. There were not too many people that saw that. You saw my inner chambers.
It was a great setup.
Thank you.
So you now record in a separate place.
Yeah, so now I have
Oh.
a separate little studio, really cheap. Like one of those things where it's like, this is a place for non-musician artists, wink wink, and like
Got it.
everyone in there is doing live acoustic drums all the time. Like
Wow. That's
like
kind of
it's
special.
I regardless of whatever I'm doing, will, if I have the time, make like a couple beats a day or like just
Yeah.
mess around just because it's like calming. It's
Yeah.
like therapeutic. I really like it. Even outside of thinking about, like you said, like, oh, I need to make a record or this needs to
Right.
be for something.
Right.
But then the just inspiration by osmosis that you get when you're just walking past and someone's like working on like a drill beat or like something, or like, oh, that hi-hat pattern is really interesting. Just like getting a little whiff of inspiration on the way to do stuff.
It's so easy to forget that like community is the reason. Like, it's like I started making music because the people around me were making music. Like, it wasn't
Right.
even this thing that I was like, okay, I'm going to become a musician. It was just like everyone was making music. So you're just inspired by that, the proximity to like great art, you know?
That is so true.
I've been wanting to catch up with you because I feel like the last time we had like a long catch up, you hadn't started putting out the singles yet.
No, I hadn't. No,
Yeah.
it was still very.
How do
I
you
was
feel?
still doing like mixing. Oh, wow, let's get into it. I love making music so much. It's always been like a thing. Even before I understood how to use a DAW or DAW or whatever, I was like doing little pencil beats or like tapping shit out. You know, like it just feels kind of in my bones a little bit to
Yes.
do that. And then the like industry / marketing aspect of it, that has been the revelation where it's like, oh, this is very interesting how like all this stuff works and how it works at the highest level. Because I feel like there is no music middle class really,
Yeah.
in the same way that there is with like TV and film, or the music middle class is like really shrinking.
Yes.
You know, I wouldn't go so far as to say it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
you come from like also like TV, film, and like going into music I'm talking business, not even so much like artistically. It's a different world and you kind of have to like adjust emotionally, I imagine.
100%. It's like, man, how was it for you? Especially coming from like a DIY indie, like sort of self-startup point of view.
Yeah.
Even though like you did have community, it's still like when you describe how you were going about it, it's not like your uncle was friends with Scooter Braun and you just like got, you know, it's not like that.
Exactly. It was more like, hey, want to play my kitchen to 10 people? I mean, I think with this new album, with Sorry I Haven't Called, I'm experiencing everything completely new because it's been 4 years since I put out an album.
Wow.
So a lot has changed about like music. A lot has changed about music industry. A lot has changed about me as a person.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of in like a whole new landscape and I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around it. It's for the most part, it's been good. Like I'm really proud of the work. Like why else would we put it out?
Right.
You know, why else would we share it? But there are different tiers of like standing by it. There's almost a tier of like, I have felt that feeling of like, whew, like I finished, I ran the marathon, I literally can't work on this anymore. So here you guys go. And then
Right.
there's like I've worked on this to what I think it's like, this is the best. It like, I didn't abandon it, which is also like it's valid to like be like, I'm done working on this. I want to move on to my next thing.
Right. Right.
But this record, even when I was done with it, I didn't actually finish it. Like I actually kept going, which was grueling and mentally not torturous, but it was like really hard to work on something for this long.
How long was the process?
Actively,
Yeah.
2 years.
Whoa.
But I'd been writing these songs for like 3.5.
Dang.
It's like being a farmer and like it's harvest season, you know? It's like
Right.
before that you're pouring into the land. You're just like I'm tired, I'm not seeing anything yet. And then once it comes out, you have to wait to harvest it. You just kind of sit and you wait
Right.
and see what it does in the world. Like, so I'm kind of excited for that part of the process.
Yeah, I feel exactly what you're saying. And then the thing that excites me the most about releasing music is that it is kind of constantly in the world. Like it
Yeah.
never fully goes away the way that, say, something like a stand-up special. Like
Yeah.
you might like revisit that, but you don't revisit it in the same way where music is just evergreen. It has multiple lives, and it, like with the passage of time, kind of grows in shape and size and matures. It's like a wine, you know, like
Yes.
I think that is something that's so cool and so special, is that you're sitting with the harvest, but it's not even like, oh, here are my crops and like this is the season for it. It's kind of like a forever
Yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
that's really cool.
I feel like when we do interviews with like writers, they ask questions that are a little different than when artists are speaking to each other, right? Just like, do you have a song on your album that was the most difficult to figure out?
Man, honestly, I think it was one of the ones that I played for you. It's the last track on the album. I went through so many different iterations of that track. And then there was like a sample thing. That was the thing where I was like, hey, do you
yeah.
think? But then I was like, I'm just going to take it out. But that one took a lot of figuring out. And like even during the mix and like the export and everything, there were like 170 something tracks on that song.
What?
Yeah, it was just like, that was a lot. It was,
Yeah.
that one was like physically a lot. I think lyrically a lot. I packed a lot into that song.
So how do you feel about it now?
Now that I listen to it, you know what? It's funny. That's one where when I'm listening back to the project, sometimes I'm just like, had to make that, needed to make that one. Glad I made that one. Can't revisit
Not doing it
that
again.
one. Yeah, like,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
do you have a song like that on your project?
So the crazy thing is I don't. That's
Really?
I've never experienced that before.
What?
It's almost like a psychedelic experience or something. Because I think one of the things about Sorry I Haven't Called is that like there's so much levity to it. Like there is complexity. I mean, it's like, it's not about my grief, but it's definitely I didn't write about grief at all. So like the levity of it is almost a gift. It's,
Wow.
I'm able to listen to it because it has so much lightness and so much, even the complexity and the depth that it has, I'm feeling it with lightness. I don't even know how that happened.
I mean, it sounds like from what you're describing that you were writing and creating from a point of view of having processed.
Yes.
And I think viewing it from like a place of being on the other side of it, which is so cool.
Right. Things happen over time. It's like the evolution of a thought. It's like just to have time, I get to actually see what the project needs to be, what the music needs to be. I think a lot about making music that will stand the test of time. I'm like that's like really important to me. I want to make something that qualifies like as like essential almost, or like timeless and quality, even if it's forward thinking and experimental, you know?
What are the things about that music that gives it a timeless or essential feeling?
Most of the time it's experimental, but it's also classic. Like I think of a song that I think is like that is Empty, like Janet Jackson. That song is like it's like in my canon, right? Much older song. I can't remember when it came out, but you hear it and you're like, this sounds like this could be a Kalela track, like right now, you know? And you think about how that was made maybe in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s.
Yes.
And that, how does it stand that way? I don't know.
Going back to the farming metaphor, I feel like that ties into the farming as well.
Yeah.
Like when you are harvesting something, there might be times where nothing shoots up at the time that you're expecting it to. And then like down the road, there's like this huge, you leave it and you come back, you abandon it, and then you realize that there's been an entire ecosystem created around that.
Yeah.
I do feel that way listening to like Janet Jackson, where I'm like, the amount of people you birthed like during this time is it's insane. Like that really is mother.
Yeah.
And that term is not to be taken lightly
No.
when it comes to Janet at all. Like that's
not at all.
that's just not any mother. Like that's
Yes.
the mother of the mothers.
I'm curious if putting music out in this way that you have has like, especially because you're like musical and you have like a musical family. Was your dad a DJ or something?
Yeah, my dad was a DJ growing up. Yeah.
Like when you have music as a part of your life like that, but no one really knows that because I feel like people don't know that you're like an amazing producer and
Oh my God.
I think generally people they forget that there are people out here like producing, like their own music, like, but especially because you come from like TV and comedy, like people may not know that you actually are doing this stuff. You're playing instruments, you're like producing your music. Has it felt like people are on board, like that they like see? Because the project is impressive. Like
Thank you.
to like pop out and to be like, no, I really do this. Like,
Thank you. It's kind of like how you said, I have to wait until it is out in the world and then people can digest it. Because honestly, where I'm at right now is like this weird limbo with it coming out. But there's already a place where, like, just before this, I was like, I need to go to the studio and I need to like pick up some stuff so that I can get my audio correct. And I like opened up a few tracks that I'm so happy that I took such a long time to release this one, because there was so much that was done in service of the project that needed to be done that made the creation time extend out past what I expected it to be. But even looking beyond that, I just learned so much, like being in the studio and looking over to May's shoulder. Like, I did not know how to EQ before I watched that. And then I was just watching him in real time and being like, oh, sometimes it really is simple. But then there were other times where I was like, yeah, no, I got to step my shit up because I have no idea what he just did. And I'm just like nodding like, right, yeah, no.
You're like, totally. Yeah. Alex Toomey is someone that we have in common.
Yeah.
We hung out at his studio.
Yes. Kenseltown East.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, what an amazing mixing engineer. So did Alex do the whole record?
So Neil Pogue did 2 tracks and Alex did the rest of them. And I love Neil so much, but just being in New York, it just made so much more sense. Like being able to go to the studio and like mix in person and do stuff like that. So yeah, that was great. But to really answer the question, the people like getting it or seeing that, a part of me almost likes being like, yeah, this thing existed outside of your gaze and it's been going this entire time. And if you're with it, you're with it. If you're not, you're not. I'm not begging you to see me in my totality because you might not even have that ability to do that. And then, right. So then I'm not going to expend energy trying to get you to see me when I could just use that energy to further develop my vision of myself and what I want to be doing.
Absolutely.
But then also so much of the music business is begging people to see you. So.
Oh my God. Literally, I describe release day as both underwhelming and overwhelming at the same time. It's like there's so much lead up to this day. But if you think about it, what can actually even happen on that day? And it's like albums are not, it's not a monolith, right? It doesn't come together in like this tiny vacuum necessarily. It's like, for me, making a record is like hundreds of tiny attempts. Like, it's like, I'm searching. I've made hundreds of attempts, and this is what I got. I've been confused by my own work. I've been uncertain about my own work in the process. And so the album being done is just, that's the arrival point. So I think that makes it easier to like not need everyone to like get it. It's like that is the destination, is that it happened, it's finished, I did it.
Also, I think the interesting thing is with releasing literally anything is people are presently experiencing your past XYZ amount of time creative efforts.
Yes.
And they're interpreting it as happening presently, currently. And a lot of the time you're like, I'm actually onto something else right now. Like
Yes.
I created this thing almost as a way of molting, where it's like I'm putting all of my current self into this, and then through that I'll be able to grow and move on even further than that and explore beyond that with stand-up or with music, because those kind of mirror each other in a way. I always view whenever something is done, I'm like, okay, that is a beautiful exoskeleton of who I was at that time, and then now it's time to develop a new exoskeleton. And then also the process of releasing it, you are kind of just there with all of your squishy insides showing your exoskeleton to someone. So there it is like very vulnerable at a certain point. Yeah.
It's so vulnerable.
How do you navigate that?
Well, I feel a little bit fragile right now. Like I feel a little bit like a newborn, you know. I experienced some like life-changing things and that have, you know, really informed how I see this whole thing again. But I think Sorry I Haven't Called being my third album makes me feel like, okay, I'm like nestled in this position now. Album 1, I didn't think about anything. Like it was like happy accident. Album 2, I thought too much about everything. And that created some internal struggle. And then album 3, especially 4 years apart, I almost feel like all the expectations may have washed away too. It's been a long enough time that maybe even some people forgot I made music. I am now coming out, and that's one thing that I've, you know, I played Pitchfork and I was seeing a lot of artists and they were like, it feels like you just popped out of nowhere with this like visual world and like dance music. And I'm like, that is speaking to like people feeling like it's your current self. There is that thing too, when you like, I labor over this stuff and I present it when I'm ready. And you almost feel like if you're not Frank Ocean, you can't really do that. But you can decide, right, to do that. And I think it actually influences what people think of you and the expectations they have of you. If I take 4 years in between records, which is not something I want to make a habit of, I think I want like fans to be like, okay, she can take her time as long as she delivers something good. That's the kind of like thing I'm trying to build. As long as the fans trust that I will give them something good when it's ready, that's like a career I want.
Yeah. I think you hit on something that is super important, but can take a while to learn, is like building the career that you want and how the decisions that you make kind of inform that. I knew what it was like to do comedy, release stuff, and then at that time not realize like whatever I release or put out, that is what people are going to be reacting to moving forward. And not even necessarily that you paint yourself into a corner, but like that is the material that you're giving people. So you have to be you can't just like put whatever out and then kind of assume that people will see the full picture. Like you really have to train people how to engage with your work. And I think that that's what you're doing is like exactly that.
Yeah, I think the visual world is like an extension of that too. When I think of like how I make my videos or like my album covers and all that stuff, and like even merch, like I think, you know, because we make music and it's audible, visually we have this opportunity to tell people what to feel about it or what to think about it or where to place it and file it in their brains. Like when you have an impactful music video or you have an impactful album cover or you have an impactful merch, like I like telling those stories too, because not everyone's going to just get it from the music, and people assign their own stuff to it, and that's okay. But I will lead the people to exactly what I want them to think.
And being intentional about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do you feel about touring? Are you gonna tour? What are your thoughts on live performance?
So, great question. I'm doing like a few shows where I'm like doing some stand up and then doing some music and kind of just like gonna open for myself.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm excited to do it just because there have been times where I've been doing stand-up, especially if I'm like in pattern where I'm just like going up. And I'm like, this is great, but I want to move the audience in a way that I cannot do with just words. And there's that from the stand-up side. And then from the other side, there have been times where I've gone to shows and the musician will be like, in between songs, just say something like water, and like everybody's like like dying laughing as he like takes a sip of water or something.
Yes.
And I'm like, man, like this crowd is just so present. And I think music can command a presence from people and a like level of being tapped in that sometimes people lose sight of with stand-up. Like stand-up can be so rhythmic sometimes, and like
Interesting.
the intonations really can tell people like laugh here. But then there are times where I'm like, but are you really like genuinely truly belly laughing, or do you just know that you're supposed to laugh right now?
Wow.
It's
That's
like
so interesting.
Yeah, it felt like there was this seal that I was trying to like poke through and figure out how to do that, and I'm excited to see what music can do.
I think a lot of musicians wish they were funny on stage. Like, I think a lot of musicians, you know, like when you said about that, here's this water and everyone starts laughing, they almost want, like, it's almost like, I think even for myself, I'm like, I would do anything to be funny on stage. But all I know how to do are play these instruments. Like, and it's like, I wish I could make you laugh.
And you know, like there's the old saying where it's like comedians want to be musicians and musicians want to be comedians.
Yeah.
As someone who has now crossed over to the other side, and I'm like in both, I've thought so much about it. This is what I think it is. I think that musicians feel too vulnerable and wish that they could get the crowd to laugh, because in that moment of laughter, you are synced up and you know they're responding exactly how you want them to respond. Whereas with music, you're so naked. Like you have no defenses. It's just you there. And then with comedy, sometimes it can feel like you're not there at all. I feel like that's also why people have responded so much to specials that aren't like necessarily just joke. They're like getting into something darker. But I think as a comedian, it gets to a point where you're like, the laughter takes on like this soured timbre. Like there's just something to it where it's like, I don't think this is enough. Like I'm not feeling enough connection, or at least I'm projecting onto all comedians and musicians. but that's at least like what I've experienced, where like music is so vulnerable, but comedy, I'm like, there is a vulnerability to it, but there's also the constant reassurance that if they're laughing, then they're enjoying this.
It's so funny that I haven't heard it said exactly like that, but it makes sense, because I do think being on stage is like it's like doming. You're like doming the audience. You have them in the palm of your hand without even speaking, and that is so powerful. And you're like, and with comedy, like you're describing, if there are these like intonations and stuff, you're also like dominating when they think they like. Being a performer is like being a dom, and it's funny that like the bit that makes a difference is the vulnerability aspect. Wow.
Have you seen the Renaissance tour?
No. Have you?
I have, yes.
Oh my God.
And talk about being a dom, like how much present control Beyonce has in the moment, to the extent that you're going into it knowing you're about to see Beyonce.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing, is it's not like I'm not expecting to be impressed. It's actually the opposite. It's that I know I'm going to be impressed because I'm going to see Beyonce. Right. But then you're there and it's like, somehow this is even more Beyonce than the Beyonce I thought I was about to Beyonce. She's so good and has so much control that it's almost inspirational. Like the ability to be able to be such a good in the moment present performer that people actually forget. Because that's the thing, is I'll see people sometimes and I'm like, the goodwill that you have cultivated with your audience is compounding everything that you're doing in the moment. And like, it's not to say that it's not great, but it's just like, you have a history of all this stuff and that's carrying you.
Yes.
But then Beyonce being able to like make you forget the goodwill is like, that's crazy. Like when she came out and she was like, New York, and everybody starts like going crazy, I started laughing because I'm like,
Top dom.
Right. Like, you know it's coming and you're still surprised by it. Like,
Wow. I think that's one thing I missed so much in the pandemic is like, you get so much inspiration on on stage performance from watching other performers. Like, just even, I can imagine seeing Beyonce, I'd be like, oh, she like holds for applause, or she knows you're gonna clap for her when she says New York. And so, whereas like, in my earlier stage version, just being awkward, being like, I literally can't look these people in the eye. So let's just get to the music,
Right.
and now like, moving on to like, I'm doing more dancing, I'm doing more choreo, like it is to bring that, how can I feel in the room with all of you? That's really difficult with music. Cause I think like, with the laughter of a good joke or something, you feel everyone there. But as you're playing your whole song, especially for me, people are really attentive and it's good. But sometimes I'm on stage, I'm like, are you guys having fun?
right.
Is this fun for you? But most of the time, they're probably just mesmerized. They're just enjoying it. But until the claps, there's no audible, like, affirmation that you're doing a good job,
Yes. I think that's like a part of the mechanism that I was talking about. But that is, I think that's also something that I felt on stage too, is like when you do the same material so much, you can almost like divorce yourself from being in the moment. I'm sure like by the end of a tour, you've played the song in that iteration of the set so many times. And it's like the challenge of being present and staying in the moment is, that's the job. Like,
That's true. That's
the thing.
Do
you have any things that like you try to do to pull yourself into the moment, like before you perform or while you're performing?
Well, that's kind of why I started incorporating movement and dancing into the stage show, because I can really drift off and think about like my taxes. Like, I don't know, like I could drift off and think about whether I turn the stove off or whatever if I'm just playing instruments, because it's something that I do quite frequently. But I've been really interested in adding dance and movement, even if the movement's just I'm walking across the stage and I want the audience to wonder if I've lost my mind, if I'm crazy, even if it's like kind of performance arty, it adds a little bit of stakes for me, because actually the like instrument playing, I'm like at a point where like I've done it so much that I can zone out. But my presence these days is coming from moving, because that's something that I didn't really do before. I'm building in moments in the set where I step away from my keys and I step away from the guitar and I like move. And that makes the stakes feel high for me. And I'm like, you literally have to be in your body. And so the Sorry I Haven't Called tour show is all about the stakes feeling high for me and almost like performing a ritual on stage. Like every night, like I'm having a physical like experience outside of my fingers making chords and my voice singing. I almost want to get off stage like exhausted from the physical ritual, because if you're in your body, then you're present, right? You can't really zone out. So movement, the short answer is movement.
That's also so interesting, thinking of and knowing you, how you started as a computer science major, right?
Yeah. Computer engineering.
That's like even more intense. Like, I think also I'm ready for the Vagabond pedals. Whatever you decide to engineer, I'm there.
Yes.
I'm there. So like,
I'm like,
please.
Teenage engineering, call me.
That sort of, at least from what I'm reading, that influencing your live show, where it's like you can almost think of these things as like, this is the code that I do for chords.
Yes.
This is the code that I do for singing. This is what I do with my voice. And it becomes like this raw data. It's like a MIDI sequence, basically, where you're just like, this is what I hit every single time. And it can become so cerebral that you do feel a little detached.
Exactly. And I will say that this album is vocally more challenging than my last. Like, this like pop style singing is hard. Like, I used to like, I come from like India. I used to scream into a microphone, you know?
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh, I need to preserve my voice. I need to hit these notes. I'm warming up and coming down. When you come from like punk music, you're not warming up and coming down. Like, it's like I'm doing 20-minute warm downs after shows. So it's like there is an athleticism to this record stage thing. But then I get off stage and I feel like I didn't just perform for the audience. I also like did something for myself. Like we both got something out of it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that also coming into back to the dom of it all, that is what, and a part of the dom is kind of being like, I know that in enjoying myself, you get enjoyment because you came to see me enjoy myself.
Well, I'm excited to see your shows.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I'm glad you're doing them.
Yeah, I needed to do at least a couple. Like, we'll see how moving forward. I kind of want to like at least put out an EP or like something else if I were to like go on an extended tour kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just because as much as I love this project, I also love like just good dancey, like high energy stuff like in person.
Right.
And I'll continue to like play with the like stand up and music of it all. I think that's cool.
I mean, speaking of that, I'm going to ask you a question that people always ask us before the album's even out, and it kind of makes me anxious, but I'm going to ask you anyway because I do want to know, are you already working on new music?
I never stop. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like going into this project, I think I sorted through like somewhere between 40 and 60 demos. A lot of them are trash, but like
ideas.
Yeah, but like an idea that informs something else. And now after this project, it went from like those early demos being like 30 something seconds or like maybe a minute or whatever. Whereas now I kind of just like finish like a 3-minute song, toss it, finish like a 3-minute song, toss it. I've always been really inspired, but like last project, I wasn't as stringent about it, but I have just been creating every sound from scratch. I got like studio time and I was like, I just want to record everything. So I just like did every note on the piano, did every hit of the drums and just like stocked everything. And I think I'm really interested right now in just like world building with sound and kind of doing that. Like Sophie is really like the North Star with that, and like how she literally created like a audio language where you hear, and it's like permeated music today where it's like you hear a song, it's like that's Sophie right there on the snare. That's where that comes from.
That's the dream. I mean, so iconic. One of my greatest like feeling scene moments is when you tweeted, I think someone had tweeted about like female producers or something, and you were like, don't forget about Vagabond, like and I was like, I felt so seen because I know we had talked about that before. And when I think of Sophie and I think of like producers and how often people were like, yeah, Rosalia comes her own vocals, and like I think it can be hard for people to see those things, but like sound design and building worlds that are like you hear it and you don't even have to know who it is. That is like for me the only sign of success is like building your own lexicon that people can pick that out in the world and be like, that no one can do that thing exactly like that but that person.
Right, exactly. That's the goal. Have you been working on music since? I'm
trying. I'm really trying to like beat the allegations that I only write 2 songs a year. But I'm a slow one. But I think, and I'm not someone who has a lot to choose from. I kind of decide that these are the songs and we're going to work on them until they're fucking good enough. Like,
right. Yeah.
So I'm trying to write more music more quickly. Not even quickly, just like more frequently. Mm-hmm. It doesn't come that naturally to me, but now that I have this album set up, then I can leisurely just keep putting ideas down that I'll revisit in maybe a year and be like, oh, that was good.
What's the vibe? What's been inspiring you recently? Where are you operating from? Also, when you make new stuff, do you feel like it's a subconscious or a conscious effort?
It's definitely a conscious effort.
Yeah.
I think I'd make more stuff if it was subconscious. I'm still really on my like dance wave. I mean, Sorry I Haven't Called is not a dance album at all, but I've been kind of flirting with, as I've gotten, better at like DJing, and I've been DJing out more often. I've been just in the higher BPM world, but still just like beautiful chords and good drums. But I think I'm like, I'm still continuing to live in that world.
I saw a tweet the other day that said 140 BPM is the new 120 BPM.
Just bear with me, I'm going to nerd out about BPM for 2 seconds. There are songs that are like, what's that Ariana Grande Weekend song? That is like a straight up pop song, but it's like 96 BPM. And I'm so, thinking of 140 being the new 120, I'm like, a song at 96 could feel like you're literally in the club. I'm so fascinated by, if you're not making drum and bass, like my song Do Your Worst, like I think that's 150, 152 or something. It's like, if you're working with jungle beats, cool. But if you can make a really up-tempo pop song at a low BPM. And I'm kind of into exploring that too. Yeah.
There's that computer engineering again. The meticulousness and the like, how do I crack that equation? Like, how do I do this plus this and make it equal something else? When I would just like mess around before I was like thinking of releasing stuff, a lot of the stuff that I was making was just stuff that I grew up listening to, which was a lot of like juke footwork, like super hot, like 160, 170 BPM kind of stuff, like really frenetic drums and stuff. And I've kind of like been revisiting that because for me, it's very subconscious. Like I almost wish that I was more conscious when I was making stuff. Like I can only, and I think that's the beautiful thing is that with stand-up, it is, and with writing, it's like, you can't accidentally write a good joke. Like you have to be intentional every step of the way. Whereas you can accidentally make a good song. Like
100%.
If you get out of your own way and just like let yourself go, you can make great music that way.
Thanks for listening to the Talkhouse Podcast, and thanks to Jaboukie and Vagabon for chatting. If you liked what you heard, please follow Talkhouse on your favorite podcasting platform and check out all the goodness at talkhouse.com. This episode was produced by Myron Kaplan, and the Talkhouse theme is composed and performed by The Range. See you next time.